Well, Iran has gone too far. The countries of the Persian Gulf have officially called on the United States of America and the Western coalition to finally destroy the Iranian regime. In the countries of the Persian Gulf, there is a widespread feeling that Iran has crossed all the red lines in its relations with all the states of the region. That is why the monarchies have called on Trump not to stop until the complete destruction of the Iranian regime, and such calls are not without reason. Analysts have calculated that banks in the Persian Gulf countries, which have demonstrated resilience since the beginning of the war in the Middle East, may face an outflow of deposits totaling more than $300 billion. At the same time, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar are already suffering huge losses because they have been forced to halt oil and gas production. But the US is behaving quite well in this situation, not in a straightforward way. Well, first of all, after the European countries refused to enter the war, Trump is demanding that all the Gulf monarchies join the conflict. And secondly, Washington has admitted that they are allowing Iran to continue selling its oil. No one is blocking Iranian tankers, and Trump stated that he is fine with that. My name is Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel and hit the like button. And leave any comment you like under this episode. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pichi News. The link is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as soon as it comes in. So, according to Reuters, the Arab states of the Persian Gulf did not ask the US to go to war with Iran. However, many of them are now insisting that Washington shouldn't stop halfway, and finally deprive the Islamic Republic of the ability to threaten this key transport artery and the monarchy's economies that depend on it. At the same time, Washington is seeking the participation of the Persian Gulf countries in military actions. According to sources, President Donald Trump wants to gain support for the military campaign in the region in order to strengthen its international legitimacy, including in the eyes of American voters, with the midterm congressional elections coming up. And as Reuters writes, quote, "In the Gulf countries, there is a widespread feeling that Iran has crossed all the red lines in its relations with all the states in the region. At first, the monarchies supported Iran and were against the war, but after the Iranians started striking the Gulf, they became enemies. There's no other way to call them." End of quote. Tehran has already demonstrated its capabilities by striking airports and seaports, oil facilities and commercial centers with rockets and drones in 6 Persian Gulf states, as well as by blocking shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, an artery through which about 1/5 of the world's oil supplies pass and on which the economies of the entire region depend. These attacks have heightened concerns that if Iran retains significant offensive capabilities or weapons manufacturing facilities, it will embolden them to constantly blackmail the region by threatening to, well, essentially block this energy artery every time tensions escalate. By the 3rd week of the war, bombings of Iran by US and Israeli forces, as well as Iranian strikes on American bases and civilian targets throughout the Persian Gulf, had intensified. A source in the region said that the leaders of the Persian Gulf countries had formed a clear opinion. Donald Trump needs to comprehensively weaken Iran's military potential, and no one is calling for de-escalation anymore. And here's another quote from Reuters. According to the sources, the alternative would be to live under the sword of Damocles. If Iran is not critically weakened, it will continue to hold the entire region hostage. And it's important to note here that US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said just last week that Washington's partners in the Persian Gulf are ready to move from defense to active measures and are already cooperating with the US in the field of collective and integrated air defense. But sources in the region report that the option of unilateral military action by any of these countries is still not being considered. Only collective intervention is being considered, which would allow them to avoid retaliatory strikes against individual states. If they are going to fight Iran, they will do it together. And here is where things get strange, because it would seem like the perfect time for the Persian Gulf countries to unite. But the 6 members of the Gulf Cooperation Council, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates, have so far held only one video conference on the topic of possibly entering the war. And as for a Pan-Arab summit to discuss coordinated actions, it hasn't even been convened so far. It's as if everyone is waiting for the US and Israel to handle things themselves, and they just don't want to interfere. It's important to understand the nuance in the Persian Gulf countries' positions. Essentially, the Arab states of the Persian Gulf are facing a dilemma. They have to balance between the immediate threat of Iranian strikes and the much higher risk of being drawn into a war led by the US and Israel. And we need to be honest here. The entry of the monarchies into the war would add little to Washington's military superiority, but it would sharply increase the risk of retaliation from Iran. As a result, the Gulf countries chose restraint, the protection of sovereignty, and the establishment of red lines without getting involved in a war they did not start and do not control. This is candid. From the outside, it might seem strange. On the other hand, this puts Iran in a more advantageous position. Iran's levers of influence are quite clear. In fact, right now, Tehran decides when ships and which ships can pass through the Strait of Hormuz and which cannot. No state in the region considers this situation acceptable, but so far none of them want to do anything about it. That's why Trump is trying to call on allies to take control of the Persian Gulf, or more precisely the Strait of Hormuz. But now, after Iran has demonstrated its ability to block the Strait of Hormuz, the countries of the Persian Gulf are facing a fundamentally different threat. In other words, if Trump can't solve this problem, the danger will remain long-term, and waiting it out won't work anymore. Well, the countries of the Persian Gulf can do the unthinkable without going to war. Here we have to admit that the entire global economy depends on oil and gas from the Persian Gulf countries, but still, the main part of these supplies goes to the east, to China, Japan, and other Asian economies. And now, the Persian Gulf countries can encourage Asian countries to join the Western operation against Iran, which would be simply an unprecedented case. That is, these are already their own relations, the Persian Gulf countries and the Asian countries. Well, the Persian Gulf countries should also influence the US and Donald Trump personally. Well, because while the monarchies can't sell their oil, Iran is successfully selling its oil to the same Asian market. Just think about it. Iran continues to export oil almost at pre-war levels, and American warships in the region are not stopping this. As stated by U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, quote, "Iranian ships are already leaving the Strait of Hormuz, and we are allowing this to ensure supplies to the rest of the world. We think there will be a natural opening which the Iranians are now allowing, and for now we are fine with that. We want the world to be well supplied with oil." I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you found this episode interesting and useful, you can support our YouTube channel financially with any donation, paid subscription, or YouTube membership. How can you do this? All the links and details are in the description of this video, or you can use the QR code on your screen. I will be grateful for any support. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.